Okay, so good afternoon again. So today we're going to speak about some other concepts, okay, uh, related to sociolinguistics. So in addition to the other concepts that we have introduced, okay, I don't think I should go through it again, but I will do it personally. So we have seen a number of variables. For example, we spoke about diglossia, code switching, etc., right? So in addition to those, today we're going to tackle other concepts which are referred to as language shifts and language, depths, because we are dealing with societies, okay, and in societies we have people, and we know that when we have societies and people, there are different number of changes that happen, okay, by the time, okay. There are some synchronous, changes that happen, diachronic changes that happen throughout time, okay. One of those, or some of those, are language shift and language depth. So shift, it means change, okay. We shift from one language to another, or language depth versus language revival versus language, maintenance, okay. Now these are some of the things, the main concepts we will talk about today. In this session we will discuss how and why languages shift. We're going to see the reasons why we can have this phenomenon of shifting from one speaking, using one language to another, adopting and speaking and using another language. So we will try to have a look at those variables there, those reasons, and also discuss how and why sometimes languages disappear or die. So there is this issue of languages that disappear or die. For example, we know throughout history, for example, for Europe, there used to be, now I'm speaking what? I'm speaking English. But English in the past, there was no English, okay? In the very far past. I'm not talking about Shakespeare, okay? You go back, okay? In the past, so there were Latin, and Roman languages. And from these two mother languages, we have now these modern European languages: English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and so on and so forth, okay? But Latin and Roman, we don't have them anymore, okay? In reality, in everyday life, or in economy, or in business, or in politics, in education, we don't have them. We just have those in religion, in the church, okay? You know that when they want to do their religion, so they use these languages. So we will try to see how and why some languages can die and disappear. We shall also look into the factors which make one language stronger than the others at different times. Okay, now, if you know, throughout history, from the very past up to now, each period, each era, one language is more powerful, stronger than other languages. So at some point in time, there was the Latin and the Roman languages. And then with the arrival of Islam, so there was Arabic and Islamic Renaissance, and therefore Arabic became more powerful, during the dark ages of Europe. We had the golden ages for the Arabs and the Muslims, And at that time, Arabic was much more powerful than it is now, So instead of Roman and Latin. So you see the fluctuation going on. Sometimes some languages are more powerful, stronger, but by the time, depending on some variables, especially related to politics, social factors, business, economy, etc., as we're going to see, then, the strength, of languages differs. You will have new languages becoming more powerful than others. So we'll see the factors behind that. Why do we have this issue? Why does it happen that sometimes languages become more powerful, stronger than others in different eras and different periods of time? By the end of this session, you should be able to explain how and why languages shift, die, revive, and remain vital. These are some of the concepts we will talk about when speaking about language shift and language death. Between these, we have a number of concepts, like here we have revival, language revival. We have here also language vitality. Okay, we also have language maintenance. These are related to the issues of language shift and language death. So by the end of this, you will be able to explain how and why languages shift, die, revive, and remain vital. Suggest ways to resolve the conflict between the need for worldwide communication and language preservation. Because usually what happens in situations of language contact, okay, like what's happening to us now in our context these days, we are having this issue in our everyday life communication using dialectal Arabic, Moroccan Arabic. Now what's going on for us? We have this need for worldwide communication. We want to be open to the others, but at the same time we want to preserve our language. So in between these, we'll have situations of code switching, French entering our language, and so on and so forth. So you will be able to resolve this conflict between the need for worldwide communication and language preservation. Some key concepts there. What is language shift? We will see what is language shift. Shift here, we're talking about shift from one language to another. Okay, we will have a look at that. What are the factors contributing to language shift? What are the reasons? So we will see what is language shift, what does it mean, what it means, and we will try to see the reasons for language shift. What are these factors contributing to language shift? What is language death? Okay. What kills a language? Now, when we're going to talk about language death, we'll try also to see why, the reasons why languages die. Some languages die. How can a language revive? The same way some languages can die, there are some languages that are on the verge of death, about to die at some point in time, but then because of some changes in the society, this language is revived. Okay, it's revived. So we will try to have a look at that. How can a language revive? And here we are talking about what we call language revival. Okay. What keeps a language vital, important, useful? What are the reasons? What are the things that make a language vital? Language vitality. Here we are talking about the concept of language vitality. How can a minority language be maintained? And here we are going to talk about the concept of, language maintenance. How can a language be maintained? What are the procedures that can be adopted and followed in order to maintain a language and not to make it die? Okay, not to make it die. So these are the key concepts that we are going to speak about. As again, I think that now you have everything available on the blog. The previous lectures, the PDF, you have them. Yes. PDF, yes. You have them in the PDF, you have them there. Okay, so and now I'm going to put the same, for you. So no need to take a lot of notes. Okay, maybe the video is not yet there, but I put it, Now here, when one language meets another, because this issue of language shift, language maintenance, language revival, language death, usually happens in situations of language contact. When we have more than one language contacting each other, being used in the same speech community. Okay, so there it becomes like the the question of Shakespeare in Hamlet, to be or not to be. That's the question. That becomes the situation for those languages that are in contact. Okay, when one language meets another, so we have these resulting situations of language shift, language maintenance, language revival, and so on and so forth. It happens in situations of language contact. When we mean language contact, we mean multilingualism, etc. Please, can you shut it off? Yeah. Make it silent. Make it silent. Make it silent. Please sit down. When one language meets another, yes. There are different situations of this language contact. Okay. When one language meets another, so we have different situations that we can have and different scenarios, okay? We can have this in situations of immigration. For instance, when some minorities immigrate to another country, we have this issue of language contact. This is one situation where we can have language contact. Another one could be like colonization, okay? When we are having a group of people coming to colonize, okay, a group of other people, okay? And the other scenario we can have is the one referred to here as non-migrant communities like ours, for example, where we have different ethnic backgrounds like Amazigh and then the Arabs. So we are having this kind of language contact as well. So we can have, these issues of language shift and language maintenance. So these are the three kinds of situations and scenarios where we can have this issue of language contact, and therefore these concepts of language shift and language maintenance, language revival, vitality, and maintenance. We're going to have a look at each one of those. Okay? The first one is we have our Moroccan brothers and sisters and family relatives who immigrate to Europe. Okay? So these people, these are referred to as immigrant minorities, and then they, immigrate to a local majority. That's Europe. Europeans, France or Spain or whatever country in Europe. So you have migrant minorities. This is the first kind of scenario, situation, where we can have this issue of language shift, language death, language maintenance. You know that, and this doesn't happen immediately, by the way. This is a process of time, diachronic. Okay? There are diachronic changes in there, because in relation to these immigrants, Moroccan immigrants, we talk about first generation, second generation, third generation, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, via these generations, now the recent generations, and I see that maybe you have this when you in the summer holidays when you receive family relatives like these, you see that these younger generations, they no more speak Arabic. Okay, some of them, not all. Okay, I'm not talking about all. No generalization here. Okay, but there are many who no more speak Amazigh, no more speak Arabic. They speak just French. Okay, and they find themselves at ease just speaking French. Okay, and then these people now here we are having an issue of language shift. Okay, this is an issue, an instance, an example of language shift. Okay, they are shifting from their native, the cultural tongue, language, which is Arabic, Moroccan Arabic, and they are shifting to the language of the local majority, because of integration and so on and so forth, Now, this is an example. And we're going to see a kind of illustration showing this shift among these immigrant minorities throughout the generations, right? And here, this story of language shift, has got reasons. Why? It doesn't just come like that. There are reasons. There are reasons behind this language shift that happened to these generations of minority immigrants or immigrant minorities in Europe. Okay, these reasons are due to two categories. There you can see there is the first category of pressure from the host society. For example, you have Moroccans living now in France. So they have a kind of pressure from the host society there because it's a majority. So the minority usually needs to adopt, okay, the language of the majority in order to integrate, okay, into the community, okay, into schools, into businesses, into culture, and so on and so forth, right? So there is pressure from the host society, and this pressure from the host society leads to kind of language shift. Okay, language shift is expected. It's a sign. For example, these generations, especially the younger ones, when they do this, okay, when they shift to the language of the majority, it is a sign for them of successful assimilation. That's to say, they have been able to integrate into the community, okay, into the majority. Okay, when they shift into French or when they shift into Spanish or Dutch or whatever local majority language. Okay, it's a sign for them of successful integration. And that's why they have this. That's why they shift. Okay? The other category is language shift for practical reasons. So there are some reasons that have to do for, okay, the first one is the same, okay? But here we are just talking about details. The details of the reasons why the local majority exercises some pressure, okay, onto the immigrant minorities. Now, this language shift for practical reasons could be like job, education, and business, right? These are the main reasons through which, okay, the pressure of the whole society is imposed onto the immigrant minorities, and via the generations we have a resulting language shift, okay? Language shift. So this is the first, okay, scenario. And we are going to have something like this. And this is the result, okay, we have throughout the generations. It's the first generation, second generation. When we talk about first generation, second generation, it means the first people who immigrated to Europe. And then these first people had sons and daughters, children. And this is the second generation. Now, this second generation got married in Europe, and then they have children. That's the third generation. And it goes on like that. You understand what you mean? First, second, third generation. And throughout the generations, the language shift is much more powerful. Okay? That's what you notice from your relatives. The first generation is still speaking, of course, because they have been brought up into Moroccan Arabic or Amazigh. Even if they have lived there for a long time, they still keep the language and culture. Then the second generation in between. The third generation is more. Okay? So that's exactly what happens here. So you have L1, monolingual. That's their Moroccan Arabic they speak. And then while moving through the generations, we have L1 and L2. Okay, the second generation, they keep both. So like L1 and L2. Here L1 is Moroccan Arabic or Amazigh. And then L2 could be French or not French. Could be French or could be Spanish, depending on the local, okay, community where they have immigrated. And then the third generation, you can have some children, okay, speaking just the second language. Okay, they have been brought up here. Okay, so the language shift of the second generation immigrants. So far, so clear, I think, because we're talking about things that you have never read about this, but you have lived with these people, right? And you know what happens to them. Okay, so here we are talking about one scenario, one context where we can have language shifts. Good. The next scenario, okay, is like a migrant majority, okay, where you can have, this happens usually in situations of colonization, okay, colonization where you can have some people migrating to another place, and then, okay, we can have, especially if they colonize a country that is small. Okay, not so many populations like Haiti, for example. You hear about Haiti or French? Okay, so now the colonizers, they impose their language on this small minority. The colonizers become like the majority, immigrant, that's why they are called like immigrant majority, and the local minority, because they are small, demographically speaking, in terms of number of people, inhabitants. Okay, we have situations like it's different from us. Morocco, when we were colonized by the French, okay, demographically speaking, we were still the majority. That's a different situation there, okay? So this is the next scenario here. Now, in this context as well, we can have situations of language shift. Language shift does not necessarily occur, or language shift could occur. Okay? Language shift could occur when one primary indigenous language is used. If in the place or they have colonized, there is only one language being used. Okay? There could be some kind of language shift. Language shift does not necessarily occur if the country that has been colonized has got some kind of multilingualism that is spread. And this is applicable for Morocco, because we have some kind of multilingualism, Arabic and Amazigh, okay? And then you have many indigenous vernacular languages. The same thing, for example, applicable for India. This is very applicable for India, because in India you have a lot of vernacular dialects. Yes, and that's why in India it didn't happen. The story of language shift didn't happen because of this multilingualism existing there, and because of this big number of vernacular indigenous dialects being used in India, right? So in this kind of context where you have colonization, you can have these two kinds of scenarios. Either language shift does not occur if, okay, or could occur, sorry, if one language, primary indigenous language is used, or language shift does not necessarily occur, okay, when we have some kind of multilingualism, and when we have many indigenous vernacular dialects being used. So in colonization, so the colonial powers impose their languages on the colonies. So forget about India, forget about Haiti, let's go back to Morocco, and you know that when we were colonized by the French, French had a very powerful position in Morocco at that time, okay, to the extent that it replaced Arabic in administration, in politics, in business, and so on and so forth, right? So the colonial powers imposed their languages on the colonies, and Morocco is a case in point. That's why, after independence, the first thing that started is the idea of Arabization, okay? Arabicization or Arabization, in the sense that they want to replace French by standard Arabic. Instead of using French, okay, into administration, education, and business, and so on and so forth, politics, and so on, they decided to use standard Arabic. But still, French, or the colonials, so much imposed French to the extent that we still feel the presence of French up to nowadays. Okay, it is still imposed, even if the colonials, okay, the colonizers left the country after independence. So this is what usually happens, okay, in that kind of context. A community shifts from one from using one language for most purposes to using a different one. Language shifts. We can also talk here, we're talking here about language shifts in terms of language use. Okay, in terms of language use, because the examples of the first generation, second generation, third generation for immigrants, Moroccan immigrants, here we are talking about language shift in terms of competence, language proficiency. Language proficiency. So the first generation, the language proficiency of the first generation for Moroccan Arabic or Standard Arabic was better. But by the generations, what happens is that the language proficiency, there is a kind of shift. They are shifting from the proficiency in Standard Arabic, Moroccan Arabic, Amazigh, into proficiency in Dutch or French. So here we are talking about language shift in terms of language proficiency. And in this context here, we are talking about language shift in terms of language use. The way we use language. When we were colonized by the French, we used French in administration, education, politics, etc. Good? But then after independence, we went back to our normal situation. So that's a kind of language shift in terms of language use. Right?
We still face the problem of code switching.
Yeah, that's why. Because the presence of French and French culture is so much powerful. Was so much powerful because we still also have satellite. We have book. It's a lot of variables there. So that's yes. Exposure. We are much more exposed to French. Okay, yeah, that's right. In TV, etc. One language replaces the roles and functions of another language in a community. So all these we are talking about language shift in terms of language use. Okay? Language use. So a community shifts from using one language for most purposes to using a different language. One language replaces the roles and functions of another language in a community. A strong language becomes weak. A weak language becomes strong in a community. So all these are examples of language shifts in terms of language use. Also in terms of language attitudes. Okay? In terms of language attitudes. Because when we talk about a strong language becomes weak, a weak language becomes strong in a community. How? Yeah, in terms of use and also in terms of attitude. Your attitude, okay? Yeah, towards the languages that you are speaking. Now, we try to talk about the reasons again. Whose language would be stronger? And we're talking here about directions of language shift. Seller into language, the language of the seller, adopts the language of the buyer. Minority adopts the language of the majority. Poor adopts the language of the wealthy. All this is related to French, okay, and English, etc. Low social class status or class to high social status. Also, we have this. And ruled versus the ruler. So whose language would be stronger? So these are some directions that we can witness or we can have in relation to language shift. And we are starting to talk about the reasons, detailed reasons for why we can have language shift. I'm going to repeat the same points in the following slides in case you missed something here. Now, to make this clear, we're going to repeat the same things and using some categories for the factors that can lead to language shift. So the factors contributing to language shift could be like economic factors. That's what we have mentioned as seller adopts the language of the buyer. They could be also categorized in terms of demographic factors. Okay, and here I refer to the story of Indians, for example, when they were colonized by the English or the British. So because of demographics, so they couldn't, change their languages. So minority versus majority. Also the Moroccans, okay, living abroad, okay, because they are minorities. What happens to these minorities? They adopt the language of the majority, especially for the second and third generations, for survival purposes, for pressure, etc. We could also have them in terms of social factors, and here we are referring to this example of poor, okay, adopting the language of the wealthy, and we are all examples of this, okay, especially in relation to French and English and foreign languages in general, because the foreign languages now for us, they symbolize the wealthy countries, right? While we are not. So that's why one of the reasons why we do speak so many languages in Morocco has to do with this. Okay, because now we are not that wealthy, we are poor, and we are trying to speak the languages of the wealthy, well, in a strive to become stronger. Okay, so those are social factors. Okay, also, low social status, high social status. Political factors. This is the ruled versus the ruler. Okay, especially in colonization and. So these are the categories of factors that can contribute to language shift. And we're going to see concrete examples illustrating each one of these factors. Okay? Now we go to our context of Hong Kong, for example, as an example, okay, of language shift. So in Hong Kong, what happened in 1997 is that this language, which is called Putonghua, has become more important in Hong Kong after 1997. What happened in 1997? Hong Kong became independent from the British colonizers, and it returned to its homeland, which is China. Okay? Now, in China, the language they speak, the national language of China is Putonghua. So after independence, so the Chinese imposed this language as the kind of national language in Hong Kong instead of English. But English is still there, but just formally speaking in terms of laws, etc. So this Putonghua has become more important after independence. So here we are having an example of language shift that has got to do with political factors. The reasons behind this are mainly political. Okay, I'm going to come back to the example of Morocco. Okay, another example is in Hong Kong as well is this national language called Putonghua has become a more important language than English for people working in the retailing industry. So in the retailing industry, this same language has become more important than English. Before independence, English was more important. But after independence, because of this political orientation, it became more important, and it is becoming also more important in business, in retail industry. And here we are having an example of economic factor. Okay, economic factor, the relationship between the seller and the buyer. Okay. Another example is in Hong Kong as well. Cantonese has replaced some major functions of English in Hong Kong in the past decades. So in the past decades, okay, Cantonese has replaced some major functions of English. In the sense that Cantonese has started to become the language of the government instead of English. Before independence, it used to be English, but after independence, it started to be Cantonese. In the sense that the language of Hong Kong legislative, it became the language of Hong Kong Legislative Council, law. So Cantonese has become more powerful in this regard as well. And also, it has become more important and has replaced English as a medium of instruction in secondary schools, in education. Instead of using English, they have started using, okay, Cantonese. Okay, so here we are talking about scenarios, okay, of language shift in terms of language use. The language use of the people in Hong Kong is becoming different after independence. Okay, it started with this idea of political factor, economic factor, and then into functional, okay, changes. Here we have political and demographic factors in these three here, A, B, and C. Other examples, social factor here. The Filipinos are the biggest group of foreign population in Hong Kong, but their language is not as popular as that of the British, which make up only 0.3% of the Hong Kong population in 2001. So in 2001, the Filipinos, in terms of number, they were much more, okay, bigger. Okay? But their language was not important. It was the language, or it was English that was important in 2001, okay? And here has to do with social factor, because the people who spoke English at that time were richer, social factor was high, etc. So English was more important at that time. In order to make this idea of social factor also clearer, I go back to the example I mentioned before in one of my classes, the one referring to France. You know, we said that in France in the past, there was no French. Okay? What happened is that at some point in time, they chose the dialect of Paris. You remember? That's what we said. Yes or no? You remember this or?
Yes.
So, at that time, they chose the dialect of Paris and they said this is going to be our national language, and thus we have French. And why they chose the dialect of Paris, I mentioned that time again in that class, that it has to do with social factors, because the people in Paris, they were much more important, much more prestigious, richer, educated, and so on and so forth. So that's an example of social factor, okay, behind language shift. The same thing is applicable here. Even if the Filipinos were much more in terms of number, but their language was not important, right? It was the language, English language, that was important. Okay, so because the people who spoke English were richer, more educated and more prestigious, etc. Social factors, okay, behind language shift. The Hong Kong population, here we have a mixture of two variables there, social and demographic. The Hong Kong population using other Chinese dialects as a usual language has decreased from 7 in 1991, 7%, to 5.5% in 2001. This is also related to demographic and social factors. So the Hong Kong population using other Chinese dialects has decreased, okay, and from 7% to 5.5%. So here we're having another language shift. Now let's go back to our context. In our context, we have Standard Arabic in Morocco after independence versus French. Before independence, we used to have French as the more powerful, more used, etc. But then after independence, we changed, we shifted to Standard Arabic. And the reasons at that time, they were political, of course, after the independence, and they were, of course, social factors, because the people, the Moroccans, especially the elite at that time, they wanted, for patriotic reasons, we have to forget about French and we have to stick to our language of our culture, etc. So the elite, social factors there, and then followed up by political, factors. So that's another example related to our context. Language shift there, and this language shift has got to do with political and social factors. Another example for Morocco is related to Amazigh recently, with the creation of the Royal Institute of Amazigh in Rabat, and with the reform and the charts, that gave more power and more prestige to the Amazigh, the dialects in Amazigh, and especially after the latest constitution. The latest constitution has recognized Amazigh as an official language. That's why now in the front of our faculty you see not only French and Arabic, you also see Amazigh, and the story is going on and on and on. Okay? Now here we have an example of language shift in terms of language use, and the reasons here are social factors, because the Amazigh people, ethnic Amazigh, they are becoming more and more powerful, more educated, and they have imposed their agenda. And this pressure has been followed by a political orientation, political backup, political support in terms of constitution, in terms of the chart, of education, and so on and so forth. So here we have another example of language shift that has got to do with social and political factors. Now we move on into how can a language die. There could be several reasons. When all the people who speak that language, of course, die. That's the rule. Reason number one, okay? How a language can die? The most evident reason is that all the people of that language who speak that language, of course, die. That sounds kind of logical, okay? When the domains in which a language is used are totally replaced by another language. In relation to Morocco, we go back now to the story of French. We don't have the death of French, but we have a reduction. A reduction. It has been reduced. Because what happened after independence is that French has been rejected from formal contexts like education, administration, business, parliament, so on, politics, and has been replaced by Standard Arabic. So that's a kind of beginning, hopefully, of death of French. So when the domains in which a language is used are totally replaced by another language. When a language is suppressed by a political power, okay, when you have a political power that tries to suppress that language, okay, for whatever reason, okay. I don't know could be the reason, but for whatever reason, you have the powerful people, politically speaking, they try to suppress, okay. In our context, for Amazigh, it's completely different of this. That's why now, for Amazigh, as we are going to see later on, we are not talking about language death, we are talking about language revival. We're going to see this when we come to the issue or the concept of language revival. Okay, so here, in other contexts, you could have this. Okay, let's skip this question. Now, we go to the issue of language revival or revitalization. I prefer to say revival, better. Okay? For pronunciation reasons. Revitalization sounds like a complex word to mention. Now, what brings dead or dying languages back to life? What are or what could be the reasons that could help the languages that are about to die and help them come back to life? Okay, help them to get revived, okay, to have vitality again. Reasons, several reasons. I'm going to refer to these reasons via examples from some specific contexts. In New Zealand, for example, you have the revival of Maori because there was a kind of cultural crisis in there. And they felt that in order to help solve the problem of cultural crisis in there, they thought that the language of Maori will help solve the problem. And then they revived that language, which helped solve the problem of cultural crisis. Another example is in Israel, the Hebrew, Israel between quotes, okay, the colonizers. So Hebrew was revived because of the feeling of nationalism. So there were many Hebrews, okay, coming back, going to Israel for their, for their stories, and then they felt that they have this feeling of nationalism, and this feeling of nationalism, they said this is our language, and we have to revive it, we have to keep it, and they have done the same thing we have done to Standard Arabic after independence. They have started using it in education. They have started printing books. They have started using politics, parliament, informal context, and so on and so forth. Okay? Even they have started using it in everyday life, which is different from us. Okay? Hebrew, for them, they have started using it in everyday life. When they meet in a cafe at home, they still use Hebrew. For us, Standard Arabic, no. Okay? So, feeling of nationalism. Feeling of nationalism is one of the reasons for language revival. Political independence, an example is in Taiwan. So after their independence, they have revived their language, their native language, which is Taiwanese. Wales, Wales in Great Britain, okay, you have revived their language, which is Welsh, for cultural identity, okay. Because that's the language of their culture, they have revived it. Now for Morocco, we have Standard Arabic and Amazigh, okay, and the reasons behind reviving these two have got to do with political independence and are due to social factors. So as you can see, a variety of reasons there for reviving languages that are about to die. Other reasons that also have a role in helping bringing dead or dying languages back to life is, of course, the institution or the institutions in the country. Acceptance by institutions, government, university, church, and media. These institutions if they accept the language that is about to die, they will help it revive. They will help in the revival of that language that is about to die. And of course, acceptance by the people. Now, you have these reasons: cultural crisis, nationalism, political independence, cultural identity, political, social factors. These reasons will do nothing if we don't have these two here. They should be backed up by these two here: acceptance by the institutions and acceptance by the people. So if we have a combination of all these, then we can talk about a true, correct, full, total revival of a language. You have ethno-linguistic vitality, and here we have this word ethno-linguistic. It is a combination of two words. You have ethno and you have linguistic. Okay? Ethno, it's coming from ethnic background. Okay? Ethno, ethnic background. Like if you say the Amazigh, it's one ethnic background. And we have the Arabs, another ethnic background, etc. Like we're talking about the races of people, their origins. And then we can talk about ethno-linguistic, which means different ethnic groups speaking different languages. And this is very much applicable for Morocco. Okay? When you have different ethnic groups, like in Morocco, we have Amazigh and Arabophones, or Arabs. These different ethnic groups, what do? They speak different languages. And when we have this, we talk about what we call ethno-linguistic vitality. Okay? Ethno-linguistic vitality. And vitality has got to do with strength, like Amazigh in Morocco, in addition to Arabic, of course. Okay? Concerning the development of a language, the progress of a language, we can have 6 factors as mentioned by Crystal, 2000. There could be 6 factors which may help a language to progress, to revive, and to be used by people. These 6 factors, first one, increase their prestige within the dominant community. An endangered language will progress if the speakers of the endangered language increase the prestige within the dominant community. That is to say, if you have a group of people, okay, and this group of people, they adopt their language that is a little bit ignored and neglected and less powerful, less prestigious. Now this group of people starts to increase the prestige of their language within the dominant community. An example of this is Amazigh again. Okay? What happened to Amazigh is that the people who speak Amazigh, they have increased its prestige. Okay? They have kept it, they have increased their prestige using it in terms of oral literature, oral communication, business, and so on and so forth. And not only that, they have increased its prestige via printing it. Okay? That's why before the Royal Amazigh Institute, the printing of books and novels and theaters and so on, so it existed. So what happened is that they have increased the prestige of their language within the dominant community. So this helped in the progress of Amazigh. Okay? Again, an endangered language will progress if its speakers increase their wealth. If the speakers of the language that is about to die become wealthy, Of course, you have the same thing for their language. It also becomes wealthy, becomes more powerful, stronger. Increase their legitimate power in the eyes of the dominant community. Their power, or the power of the group speaking the language about to die, they increase their legitimate power. They become more powerful. They become more powerful how? Via education, via, of course, becoming wealthy, and so on and so forth, via culture, via many other things. And have a strong presence in the education system. And endangered language progress, if its speakers have a strong presence in the education system. Because you have to know that the changes that are occurring now officially for Amazigh is not random. Okay? One of the main reasons of this is that the influential people who have led to this change, they have become educated. They are university teachers, poets, writers, and so on and so forth. Okay? So if the group speaking a language that is about to die, they have a stronger presence in the education system. So the same thing happens to their language. Their language is revived, becomes stronger. And of course, an endangered language will progress if its speakers can write down the language. And of course, the things here are related, right? Here, things are related. Okay, we can't speak about one thing alone. We are just speaking about the whole picture here, okay? That includes a number of reasons. Can make use of electronic technology, okay? This is another reason mentioned by Crystal for helping an endangered language progress. And another version of factors that can be used to access or to assess ethno-linguistic vitality. You have Giles, 1977. He suggests three main factors in order to assess if a language is vital or to assess the vitality of a language. And these main factors are demographic strength, institutional support, and this is, of course, very much applicable for Amazigh in Morocco. I'm going to explain. The status or demographic strength and institutional support don't worry, you will have this in PDF. Okay, if you miss something, you will have it in PDF. Okay, but I have to go on because we started late and already 5:30 now. So let me okay? Are you with me? Yes. Yes? Now, concerning the demographic variable has got to do with the number of people. If you have a large group of people, big number of people who speak the language, that's a sign of the vitality, of the ethno-linguistic vitality of the language. Another sign of the vitality, ethno-linguistic vitality of the language is the prestige. The prestige of the group. If they have, okay, they belong to a group of people that is coming from a high social status, that's another sign of the vitality of the language. And finally, if the language has got some institutional support, if it has some institutional support, it is also a sign of the ethno-linguistic vitality of the language. This is just a repetition of the same ideas, okay? Now, another concept we have to speak about, and we're about to finish here, okay? How can a minority language be maintained? If a language is an important identity marker, if the language is an important identity marker, and here Amazigh is a good example, we can talk about maintenance of the language. It's going to be maintained. It will not die. Okay? The same thing for Standard Arabic. Standard Arabic, one of the main reasons why after independence, okay, it was decided to replace French via using Standard Arabic, because Standard Arabic is a strong, important identity marker of the Arab culture, patriotism, Islam, and so on. Right? If a minority group is cohesive, another reason that can lead to the maintenance of a language rather than the death of the language, if the group speaking the language, they are cohesive. Like Chinatown, for example. In Chinatown, the people, they are cohesive. I have lived with the Chinese in Europe, and they are very much tied together. They help each other and so on. So via this, they are very cohesive. They kept their language. Okay. Now, if you go to abroad, to Europe, and you go among the Chinese, you will feel that even in third generation or whatever generation, they still speak Chinese. No, we can't talk about language shift for them because of this reason of the minority group is cohesive. And of course, we have it for Amazigh as well, because the Amazigh and because of the identity marker, Amazigh is maintained. If a minority group keeps close contact with the homeland, now the mini Moroccans, even in third generation, because they still come every time to Morocco, and because they keep close contact with the homeland, they have maintained their language. There isn't shifts. And finally, if a minority language gets institutional support, if a minority language gets institutional support, of course, it is going to be maintained. Okay? It is going to be used in different domains, and it will be maintained. Thank you very much.